Hi.
Hey, we've got people in the waiting room, and you were kind enough not to let them in yet. Can you hear me?
I don't see anybody in the waiting room.
Okay, I'm going to be admitting them in.
Okay, hold on one second. Okay.
Sure. Hello. Long time no see, Stephen. I say the same thing to Jordan. Long time no see. Hello, Steve. So Stephen, you're muted, so we can't hear you. And then Miss Haley's coming in. Jordan, you have not got to meet Haley yet, have you?
I haven't. Nice to meet you, Haley.
Nice to meet you as well.
And Mr. Rap, meet Jordan, and Jordan and Stephen have got to know each other in our 30-day group in the morning.
Hey, good morning, or good day. Hey, Haley, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, nice to see you all.
One of those. So we'll see who pops in. Haley's going to get our presentation ready. We are already recording, and we are now moved to once a month. Our Q&A was every week. We have discovered that it is more helpful to have a consistent, how do I want to put that word, Ms. Haley? What word do I want to give it?
Presence or attendance?
Attendance, even better. And appreciation for the experience. Thank you. So what we usually do for housekeeping aspects of it, and you're welcome to engage, ask questions as we walk along. And Jordan, you will have a blast getting to share, because those of you that may not know, Jordan is also Axiogenics certified. So, and he is going to be able to have a kick out of this presentation and be able to add his own flavor of thoughts and questions as we move forward. And then we will open it up for questions. We will open it up for any type of, as you know, it's an open range Q&A, and then we will move on from there. Are you ready, Ms. Haley?
I'm ready. Let's get this on up.
So and we will need to make that nice little visual updated too, please. As we get to find the every Monday, we will be moving to once Monday on the second Monday from moving forward. And we will use our Facebook community. We have done a great job of connecting others in our Facebook community, because it is all about loving what you do again. So the reason we created this Q&A is that we know that is benefit of leaders owning their leadership, so that they truly get to assess and confirm and verify their evidence to walk their talk, which means that they're acting, speaking, and thinking in a place where it truly allows them to love what they do again, or even greater. And that is what this whole Q&A is set up for. So we invite you to invite others on a monthly basis. We started over these last few months talking about the joy of a cognitive asset. And as you get to see, and Steve, I'm going to let you take on the Mr. Rep. I'm going to let you share the definition of the hemi-igen that we're working to remind you of on a daily basis.
Of the what?
Would you read that out loud, that definition, please?
Oh, yeah. I have to move my screen here. A perspective with a score of 100% is a cognitive asset. There are perspectives, ways of thinking from which you have a very high capacity for clarity, wisdom, and good value judgment. Cognitive assets are your good ways of thinking, and there's never a time or a circumstance when good thinking is a bad thing.
And you coined this fun little engine. Which engine did you call this engine, Steve?
I don't remember.
The
Hemi.
Hemi.
Yes.
So it was fun. I got to explain this multiple times with multiple people recently, and Haley's going to take you into the next one, which is the fun, biases and liabilities. And we've also used the concept of a broken oar. Jordan may have heard Peter talk about this, which is one of our coaches, when you're using your biases, it feels like you're in a boat with only one or and it's broken, and you're working your way to accomplish things out of your biases. So Jordan, would you read this one out loud for us?
Yeah, perspective with a score of less than 100% is a cognitive bias. These ways of thinking have some form of learned or adopted bias. The cognitive bias is not necessarily all bad. Your biases have at times helped you in life, but they can also create problems. When a cognitive bias undermines your success and happiness, it is considered a cognitive liability.
And do you see, Jordan, why we added a jail cell?
I have an idea of why that's there.
Well, it helps, Jordan, that you've already read the book too. So is there anything you would love to add to the joy of knowing with the Axiogenics profile and the Robert Hartman tool that we get to help people discover their biases and their liabilities, as well as their assets and their ability to move out of the jail cell into using a Hemi engine? Is there anything else you would like to add in this before we keep moving forward?
Yeah, I would just emphasize like just going through it myself, as a client, just really having the self-awareness of which ways of thinking were obviously helping me achieve what I wanted to, and kind of a path of least resistance to get there, and which ways of thinking were likely causing, some of the challenges and problems in my life, like to the point where it's affecting me emotionally and, getting in the ways of my relationships that matter a lot to me. So having access to your best thinking is so foundational, because the whole idea behind, I guess, axiology and axiogenics specifically, I guess, like we're creating more value in the world. And that's what the human mind and spirit is wired for. So if we're in a position to where we're thinking with the intention of creating more value, we're likely going to become more attractive to others, and like kind of find that path of least resistance. So it's such a powerful tool and transformation. And you think about it as well, like thinking is at the foundation of everything. Everything starts with a thought, and then we act, and then we say something, and then we make a choice. So if we're more conscious of our thinking and like coming from a place of our best thinking, life gets to be pretty cool.
Isn't that a beautiful place, right? And when we start to become aware of that, so what we're doing in this, what we've been doing in this Q&A is helping people understand the gift of this tool, and that they have access. It's completely free for them to take the assessment. It's completely free for them to get some awareness of it. And then Haley, you have another visual in the next slide. One of the things we also have in the Onion book, which has been pulled off the shelves, it is getting released in August, and yet it is still being purchased to this day, interesting enough, and we're preparing for future purpose. It will be released hopefully in August by Audible, paperback, and ebook. And because we incorporate, and we just had a blast, I was telling Stephen about this, I'm sure he'll ask a question about it. This Saturday, we literally walked some people through some fun experiences with these tools to start seeing it lived out. It was hilarious. Anyway, so the reason I bring that up is that when you start with the life wheel, which is one of our coaching tools, and we show people through the Axiogenics how they can live more with their Hemi engine and have more A game show up. And that's still a whole nother aspect of it. And start, as Jordan was saying, understanding how easily we fall into the jail cell and how much more freedom we would have when we release ourselves from that. And so we have a Living Unlayered mastermind group that Mr. Stephen and his wife and many others will be going to Gatlinburg to experience the depth of this tool. And yet he is in the experiences in different aspects already. So we introduce people to this, to the awareness that we have tools for that and opportunities. And today, most importantly, we're focusing on one more slide, I believe. A reminder of the or. We're moving away from the or. We're moving into the Hemi engine. And Stephen DeSena, would you read this one, please?
Sure. Something is good to the degree that it has every attribute required to fulfill its purpose.
And anything stand out to you about this definition?
Yeah, we need lots of attributes. And if you can find the attributes, you can fulfill the purpose.
Isn't that a beautiful gift, right? And
It gives you something to look at and look for, and you know, trying to make it complete to make it good. It helps when you know what you're looking for.
what a great statement, Stephen. And that is what brings us to today. Before we move to the next slide, it's something is good. And Jordan said earlier, and what we've been working to fulfill in these introduction slides and awareness opportunities is to help people understand if they're working without all the attributes, they're not fulfilling their purpose. And Stephen, you did a great job of saying there, it helps to know what attributes you're looking for to fulfill that particular purpose, which leads us to the next slide. The central question. And Steve, this is something you may not have seen before. So if you're comfortable with, I'll let you read this one.
Me,
Can you
Steve?
see this one?
Stephen or Steve?
Steve Brett.
The central question is, what choice can I make or action can I take to create the greatest net value?
And Mr. DeSena, you wanted to add something to that?
No.
You're like, I'm not jumping on that one. Miss Haley,
Somebody
anything you
else
want to
can
add to
have the
this?
pleasure. Somebody else can have that pleasure.
See, what I need is a full-time assistant to walk around with me and remind me of these attributes and point me in each situation towards the right choice or action. Does that sound like a reasonable thing to want?
You may absolutely contemplate that. And we did have a wonderful discussion about that earlier, about, you know, what opportunities would be available for that. And yet we do have a very specific tool to help people discover how to create this question to be more purposeful with it. But Haley, I think there's something you might want to add to that.
I think it goes along with what Jordan was saying and what Stephen DeSena was saying, in that you have to know what you're looking for. And so previously we were looking at the definition of good, which in one of our Q&As before, I had talked about how I love the objectivity of that. A lot of times goodness can turn into this kind of fluffy, subjective conversation, and it doesn't necessarily get anywhere. So the objectivity of defining good so that there's a point in which you can move toward or away from is really helpful for me. And then taking that awareness and turning that into an action or a choice where you can move yourself further in the direction that you've previously decided was good and moving you further along in your purpose. You know, it's all one consistent effort to get you moving along, but you have to take these steps so that you're having the complete experience in the order that we talked about it. So first you have to decide what is good, be aware of your assets and biases. And then with those two, I guess, three things, then you can decide what you want to change or continue and how you want to move forward.
Steve, did you have a thought, Mr. Rep? Or are you
Nope.
just saying, yes, I agree with that?
Yep, I agree with that.
One of the key awareness, and Haley, I love all the additional value add to that whole conversation. And the other key that I really love as we teach this is the concept of the greatest net value. And that reminder of the depth of that definition, because there's so much awareness of opportunity of how people define value, which is why we have this tool to begin with. So it leads us to the next question, which Haley set us up for, is what this is called a personal development goals worksheet in our tool. And we're introducing this in our Q&A group so you can understand this is just the beginning of where we start with somebody to help them understand that they have an opportunity to assess. Remember, that's the whole love what you do again concept. And they have the opportunity to determine where they're headed. That is that purpose, so that you can determine if you have all the attributes. And then we have a multitude of different parts of this document to walk you through that whole conversation. So you get to ask yourself, what would I like to achieve and or change to make better in my life is. What is that purpose? And that is what our conversation is open forum about today, is when we contemplate, do I have every attribute required to fulfill my purpose? Have I clarified my purpose? Everybody follow me on that?
Isn't that always the question? What is my purpose?
And Stephen, as you know, we have a multitude of tools to help people with that discovery, right? And
Yes.
the purpose in some aspects does change over seasons, right? Yet this could be a simple purpose of an immediate 30-day goal, like we have in our 30-day home run, and it could be a long-term, the next 90 days, what's the purpose? It could be, I'm filling out my eulogy and I'm determining what do I want to leave behind in a legacy. What we've learned for these particular documents is more realistic to be something that you would like to achieve, change, or make better in your life in a realistic time frame. Jordan, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you just emphasized it there at the end there, like kind of the importance of A to B by D. Like, where's A? Where am I today? Where do I want to be? And then by D, what's the date I want to achieve it by? Because when we start talking about like purpose and like kind of bigger, loftier stuff, like that can kind of feel like it's a moving target and like something that we're consistently, I don't know, trying to search for. Versus, yeah, being very clear in what you said, April, there, like what's my very clear and concise measurable goal, and what's the date I want to achieve it by. And that's when you start kind of filling in, okay, like here's my purpose, what's gonna, back to the definition of good, like what attributes I needed to plug in now that I have the purpose, so I can get on a faster track of achieving it.
And Jordan, would you be comfortable sharing a sample of what would you have used in this document before?
Yeah, so I've gone through, I do this personal development goals worksheet like a minimum of, probably 3 times a year, a minimum. And I think the most recent one is what I'd like to achieve or make kind of change in my life is really inviting this new step into my business as far as leading group coaching sessions. So I said to myself that I want to lead 5 different group coaching sessions by the end of Q3. And so that's my crystal clear goal. And then like by the end of Q3, then I'll be able to at least like measure myself and see if I'm on track to achieving that, etc. So that's one example. I've used it also just in even in my personal life, right? Like I want to have, this may not be like quite as specific, but like kind of just improving like communication between me and my wife, right? And like kind of like lower the amounts of disagreements or heighten the amount of times that we're like feeling joy and experiencing and laughing together. So that's something else I've used it for, and also just kind of finding my purpose, honestly. Like I know I mentioned that was kind of lofty at the beginning, but I really had a strong focus on like taking a deep dive on what do I really feel like I'm on this planet for. And that's what I worked with a coach with for 1.5 years, using the concepts of self-leadership and thinking assets and biases.
Well, and Jordan, you've been doing this for quite a while, and yet I love your awareness that this is a constant discovery, right? This is a constant decision, and this is what we call a mindful tool to be purposeful and intentional about self-leadership. And that's why it's called the self-leadership program, right? And Haley, is there another slide in there? Is there a question?
This is it.
Okay. And I was like, I think this is it. Jordan, a couple of things also you said there in the respect is one of the things we use more intentionally in axiogenics is the difference between who I need to be, who I want to be, not what I'm going to do. Once I choose what I want to be, then I move into what I will do. And so I just want to make sure to add that piece to it. Is there any other questions on the slide before we open it up for conversation? Nice and simple. All right, Ms. Haley, you can pull that down. Thank you very much. As Stephen is typing away on something in that aspect, it's totally okay. You know, the high school teacher.
I'm so glad you said that, because I looked up at it and it's all in caps.
Very good. Now you all remember, or some of you may or may not know, I've been a high school teacher, so I just can't help but even in the Zoom room be conscientious of what's going on. But, okay, it is open for the reason we wanted to share and remind you of determining the purpose is that it's just another tool to determine, as Jordan so succinctly said, is being aware of where we are, how we're going to be focused purposely of where we're headed, and do we have all the attributes required. That is one of the options for conversation today. But and as everyone knows, you may ask any question you want, and we will open it up to the group as an open forum. Who wants to start?
Well, I don't have a question. But April, you and I have been talking about some pretty specific things about business and the real estate business specifically, and our relationship with EXP and moving forward. And I'm pretty sure this is a fairly, well, not fairly, can't fairly be universal, but I think it's universal. In just the last week and a half of being focused on new things, I have found that there's just so much to look at, and being focused on that and having, you know, certain things at top of mind are causing me to go in directions that I hadn't really thought were an option before. And so I guess encouragement, if you're trying to develop or grow something, you know, talk with your coach about it and get into the real meat of what that is. And it's, I don't know, and I hope it's not just me, I hope it's everyone. In doing that, it allows that creativity that we have. It's like it's just spinning in the back of my brain. It's like, oh yeah, crap, I gotta find something to write it down on, you know, and then you write it down. And I've just found myself doing that a lot in the last week. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
I mean, that is definitely some a way that I operate that works well.
So Stephen, can I translate like Haley does
Sure.
so well for me? May I translate that a little
Sure.
bit?
For
the rest.
Takes off her earphones.
What? Okay.
What? Clearly they don't work.
Go ahead.
So I tell everybody that, you know, sometimes when I speak, Haley gets to be my translator. And sometimes when you're in a group, Stephen is sharing that one of the things some people know and do not know, Stephen and I also are building a partnership of our EXP real estate team. And so many people do not know that I'm licensed in real estate as well. I've been licensed for over 20 years in California. And so when Stephen was ready to move into one of the companies that I get to be part of, we were able to start recognizing that there was opportunity to start expanding that reach. And yet Stephen also needed to be ready to expand that reach. And so Stephen just said something that was really, really powerful that not everybody may have caught. He says once he was ready to have that conversation and put all the ideas out on paper, then it moved it from the head of a roadblock, a jail cell. It then became a Hemi engine with his asset, because we also know his asset and many others as we continue to work through that opens him up and opens myself up and other people we have contact with, because EXP is worldwide now, and I get to be the coach of the company. I still remain the coach, yet I also, from 20 plus years of real estate, get to be the opportunity to help them know what they need to do to start the growth process for that team. And we have had multiple conversations with multiple people that could expand into that team. Did that all make sense to help you understand where he was going with that? Because the other thing the opportunity, and this is the interesting thing that I tell people about the lanes, and Haley, you might be able to express a little bit more about this. When I shared it with Haley of the thought process of what I'm working on, she's like, oh, another plate for you. How fun is that? And the gift of it is that one of the things that each of us know, and Haley and I talk a lot about this in the concept of holding buckets. So each of us have certain things that we're supposed to hold buckets for. So, and Steve, and this is something, Mr. Rep, you will appreciate in how many different vertical lines do you plan on working on this year? Just 3, right? So as you recognize, coaching, our expansion of coaches, and our real estate are our 3 vertical lines. And what we are working diligently for our current clients, future clients, and coaches and community is to teach them that we don't want just to be the worker bee in the business. We want to learn how to move into the manager and investor and people that we move and grow into being the, not just the individual that's providing the services, but learning how to delegate to the other people that hold the bucket for the services that need to be done. So what Stephen also said is I'm becoming creative and understanding, oh, now what attribute do I need here to fulfill this team? What attribute do I need here to fulfill this? What do I attribute? And Haley and I have worked diligently on what attribute we need to fulfill the teams that are on our coaching team. And we are working more and more diligently to find the right people to fill those buckets. Is everybody following that? It's an interesting look. And Haley, you want to add any more to that?
I really think that the bucket idea is also tied to the accountability responsibility conversation, because once you become aware of what is actually in your bucket, so in reference to what we're talking about, you know, it's like everyone has different tasks delegated to them in any business, right? And I think businesses work best when those are set ahead of time. They're not messed with. So you don't have people who are like, wait, is this your job? Is this my job? So we have things in each other's bucket, right? And my thing is not in your bucket and your thing is not in my bucket. So once you're aware of what's in your bucket, then you're accountable to it. You should be accountable to it. However, you don't want to tie that to being responsible to what may or may not actually be in your bucket, you know, versus like the ideal bucket that you could have. We all have a bucket that looks a little bit different than our ideal bucket. So not blaming, not throwing the blame onto someone else's bucket. You know, your bucket's empty here, which is making my bucket empty, you know. So just, I think that those 2 ideas are really important to marry together, because it could go bad pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. That's a really powerful statement. So did everybody just pick up on all that fun stuff that she just covered?
Yeah, so who translates for her?
You're on your own there, bud. I don't know.
I can translate what you just said, if that would be helpful. So one of the things that as you start to expand a team, if there's a missing piece in a bucket, or if there's something that needs to, and Jordan, share on the love and responsibility. That's part of our mindful tool. Is there anything specific that you heard Haley share in that?
Yeah, I think to kind of connect back to something that was said earlier, I think it was Stephen, said that there's a lot of attributes, and like the whole idea behind like the bigger your goal is, and like the bigger your team gets, and the more you expand as an organization, as a person, as a, you know, once your goal gets bigger, then yes, I completely agree. Like the more attributes are going to be required. And what I heard Haley saying in that is, you know, just being very clear about which attributes belong to which, you know, like which group of people or which person specifically. And just the importance of taking pause and like having that conversation and finding clarity and asking for them to even reflect it back is something I would encourage. So there is mutual understanding. Because yeah, like when we, as far as like the principles of self-leadership, when we become more responsible, we're actually responding to what's happening in the present moment as well. Like, and we can only do that when we are accountable first. So we need to take into account what happened yesterday that has created this reality today. And now that I have like self-awareness around that and have stepped into that, now I can respond in a more valuegenic way that's actually going to be beneficial and help move us forward or help keep us, you know, get back on track to, you know, maybe those vertical lines. I'm not quite familiar with that language quite yet, but that's kind of how my mind put it together.
Well, take
Great.
it to,
Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, to, you know, to piggyback on that along these lines, I mean, it's really important to document that as well. You know, when you start diversifying your team, you know, I experienced that where I did have the conversation, I got the feedback, but because it wasn't a documented plan, it never happened the way that it was supposed to, and that ended up turning out badly. So in addition to getting, you know, to making that statement and getting the feedback, it needs to be a written plan that needs to be followed and followed up on, because you may have it in your head how things are supposed to go, but sometimes other people's perspective is different.
Yeah, and that analysis paralysis is very real. So you could spend a lot of time picking apart why something is the way that it is or how it got there. But if you don't turn that into actionable steps, has it really served you in any way other than just probably making you upset, disappointed, you know?
Yeah.
And Steve, what have you learned from that, and how are you moving forward to so if you
So
were to contemplate.
I haven't gotten to the point yet where I'm revisiting that plan, but I'm contemplating it. And if I do, there will be a written plan with very specific, detailed steps for attaining those goals that somebody's going to be signing off on.
Okay, I heard a whole bunch there. So
Don't translate that.
yeah, I'm not translating that one. He's got to translate that first. Yeah, I have an idea of, well, and so Jordan, a couple of things to get you caught up with the concept of vertical lines. As you, there's a gentleman by the name of Robert Kiyosaki who wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it's the underlying concept that we can always, I mean, if we open a business and we are the only one that can do that business, we're self-employed. We are in a position where that is the only thing we can do. And as we expand, as you talked about, you start to add on people, and you start to contemplate what you've done over the seasons and what could cause income. And what are ways to build where you move from just being the person doing the business, but you can also have multiple income streams. That's what vertical lines are, multiple income streams. So you can have an opportunity. So you have multiple ways to build revenue for different aspects of it, depending on how you build those vertical lines, how you write out that plan, etc., and confirm what you're capable of doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. And believe it or not, and actually we're going to be meeting, we have a couple of people that we are blessed with, but for the real estate people, the vertical plan for building a real estate team was already written in this really big book. And it's already there. It's already, everything's functioning. I just get to hold somebody in this room accountable to building the process and helping the journey of that. Yet he's ready for that now. And he was open enough to say, I hear it, I see it, I feel it. And you're holding your hand up because, oh, you're just saying, yes, I agree.
I'm spinning another plate.
Yes.
See the plate?
And yet what we know, Stephen, and I'm going to read something that I read to somebody today. It said, one of the things that we worked to do is find what we call hired talent. And talent is, and I love this sentence, it says, when you work with talent, it's about as inconspicuous as a mighty redwood in a field of Christmas trees. Talent stands out. And your opportunity is to discover that talent and recognize the things Haley does, I can't imagine doing. She does it so well. I'm just like, and I'm at a meeting the other day and somebody asked me, and Haley laughs at me because I get asked this regularly, include, can we hire her to do this too? And the lady that's at the meeting, she says, as long as April can hire me too. And the interesting thing about that, we share that and we actually do some opportunities, because I knew the minute when Haley was able to come on board, she got to see all the things that I've been teaching, but I also needed to have implemented. And there were pieces that still needed to be cleaned up and clarified and concisely done. And Haley can't imagine, we did a whole podcast about how we work from each other. And Haley's like, I ain't doing what you do. That's not happening. And the gift that we've learned is that we work well in our buckets, like she's saying. But if this bucket needs something in it, I can't take responsibility of you putting something in that bucket. I need to rely on you to figure it out. I'm going to keep handling my buckets. I'm going to rely on you to handle that bucket. And go ahead, Stephen, you're going to say something.
No, I'm talking to myself.
That's interesting. And those are the things that you learn as you're growing and building other team members up, is learning, okay, this, and as you know, we've had opportunity to have other conversations around that, all of us, in different ways, and how we're building each other and providing a pathway for our companies that we get to serve, or our individuals that we get to serve, or our corporations we get to serve. I just had a call, that's what made me right on time today, with a lady I got to serve at I did a free coaching service for, and thankfully I've earned relationship with her, and they're considering the Leadership Academy we have now, because, oh, that sounds really interesting. There's a really need for that. But that was investing in that relationship for years beforehand. That's part of what I get to do in my bucket to make sure we're filling up our buckets. Does that make sense? Did I cover all that? And Haley, you want to add anything to that?
No. Yes, you did cover it. No, I don't want to add anything.
And Steve, when you went into that point of vertical lines and understanding the desire of it, you understand why you want vertical lines, but you also, just like Mr. DeSena said, you need to get it documented. You need to get it in your brainstorming sessions, and if you allow us, giving us the opportunity to teach you how to do it in your asset, will give you the opportunity to start looking at it from a different perspective. Because Jordan, will you speak just a few more minutes on what you shared about being your own coaching client and recognizing, stepping into your coaching client aspect, what might be happening?
Yeah, so sorry, do you mind asking that, like, maybe a little bit differently? I just want to make sure.
Going back into that translate is the opportunity, as you mentioned earlier, now that you're in a coaching client concept, in a business development opportunity, your opportunities to start looking and self-reflecting, what tool, which asset am I using, which bias am I stuck in? Would you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay, yep, I'm with you. So I think a helpful stat regarding our biases is, I love asking the question, people who have been in their role for a while, or kind of in their career, whatever they've been doing, what's the percentage that you're actually doing things like from an autopilot place. You're kind of subconsciously like not really thinking twice about it. Right? Like usually that number is pretty high. So there's studies out there that show like up to 90% of our thinking is at the subconscious level, is at the habitual level. And our subconscious thinking is attached directly to our biases. So if we're navigating up to 90% of our day coming from a subconscious place, we're coming from a biased place, and wonder why we can't really get stuff figured out, or why there's pain, or why I'm struggling through it, it's likely because we're not really doing like stepping into our assets. That's much more conscious and clear thinking. So what I mentioned earlier was, as I navigate, that goal that I mentioned earlier of building my client list and building, a successful group coaching process is, really pausing and stopping and like checking myself, like, okay, like I know I'm coming from a place of my biases because I know how I feel and I'm like reflecting on that. And so with that being said, knowing the principles of self-leadership and like the effectiveness of coming from the place of my assets, I know that's scientifically validated to create more value and also invite more value into my life. So kind of doing that, once you go through self-leadership, those are the tools that we teach people, is like more so switching lowering that 90% for one, and then like creating new thinking habits, or almost like waking up new thinking habits that may have been like kind of sitting on the bench for a little bit. They're in there, but it's just more so like re-energizing them and waking them up and giving them the tools. And the whole idea is that questions move minds. And that's why we put the central question of life, love, and leadership there. It's like our brains are literally wired to answer or respond differently to a question than they are a statement. And once we start elevating the effectiveness and like once we start elevating the quality of the questions we're asking ourselves, that's when we start noticing like some new ideas flowing, and like more creative sides of ourselves flowing, and more alignment with who we are flowing.
Love it. Great job. And Stephen and Steve, was that helpful in regards to the assets and bias awareness?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, there's an action and reaction, if you're thinking with a plan and planning to think and, executing stuff with a plan, then you're going to elevate your business.
100% agree. Mr. DeSena?
No, I'd agree. And I guess at some level, I'm going through that, being my self-awareness coach. So I'm looking forward to having those experiences. I'm early on in the first stage. So
In the self-leadership program, yes.
Self-leadership program, yes.
Yeah. Well, and the exciting thing, and Stephen, you shared it in the previous groups. I mean, you've gone through a journey of rebuilding your business and growing your business over the years, and now it's just going to add another layer into the opportunity to do it with more ease and more purposeful and intentional focus. Is there any other questions anyone else has today? I have one more thought. If no. Isn't that simple? We allow an hour. If we go the whole hour, we go the whole hour. If not, that's okay. We give you another 15 minutes to your day. The thought that I would leave with you as we prepare for next month, we've already put in the calendar, we are going to be diving into evidence in our next session and have a whole slideshow of discussing that concept of evidence. And Jordan, if you were to share, if you know and are comfortable, if you were to pick one bias and one asset, do you know what they are? Of your own?
Of my own. Well, the one that gets in the way the most is my being at peace. That's a bias that I possess, and it's one a lot of people possess, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And one that I rely on very consistently, especially in my coaching, asset-wise, is nurturing others. That's one of my assets.
And ironically, we happen to share the same room with the same assets and biases. Go figure. So the exciting thing is that we get to remind people that we have a tool that can help them get introduced to that in the same aspect. And again, this is a free service and this monthly thing. But what we're doing when we go into evidence next month and we have this free Q&A again is having a conversation of how people discover and clarify and confirm their evidence to verify it's aligning with their purpose. Does that make sense? That sound intriguing?
Yes.
Awesome. Then the opportunities, if you're not working on those documents or want to consider the assessment, feel free to ask more about that. I think everybody already has that information. And Jordan and Stephen and Mr. Steve Rep, thank you for taking the time. And those that don't know, we actually have California, Texas, Colorado, and Oregon represented in the room today. Isn't that exciting? So thank you all for being here, being present, giving some wisdom to those who will listen to the video afterwards. And again, feel free to reach out for any questions in between. That's it.
Thank you.
Right.
That's simple.
That's all.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good
Have a
night.
great day.
Bye.
Bye.